In the snow outside a small farmhouse, someone found footprints. They led from the edge of the forest, straight to the front door, but no footprints led away. Whoever made them was still inside. This is Hinterkaifeck, a small, isolated farm in Bavaria, Germany. In 1922, it stood alone at the end of a dirt path, surrounded by fields and thick forest. The nearest village was a short walk away, but the farm itself was cut off, hidden behind a rise in the land, out of sight of any neighbor. In the village, the family was known, but not entirely liked. There were old rumors about the household, whispers that never quite went away. 6 people lived here. Andreas Gruber, the head of the household, in his 60s. A man used to running his farm his own way and answering to no one. His wife, Cecilia, elderly and frail. Their daughter, Victoria, a widow, raising 2 young children alone, a 7-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy. And only days before, a new maid had arrived to help with the farm work. She had never spent a single night in the house. In the weeks before, strange things had begun to happen. Not once, but again and again. More than once, Andreas found fresh footprints in the snow, leading from the tree line to the farmhouse and never leading back out. One morning, he followed a set of prints all the way to the barn and found nothing there at all. He told neighbors he had heard footsteps in the attic, footsteps with no one there to make them. He found a newspaper on the property that did not belong to the family. No one had bought it. No one knew where it came from. A set of house keys vanished and was never found. The family had heard of these things before. Months earlier, a previous maid had quit her position without warning. She told people in the village that the house was haunted, that she had heard something moving above the ceiling at night, and would not spend another evening under that roof. The villagers gave the presence a name. They called it a knocking spirit. But Andreas Gruber did not call the police. Whatever he believed was happening, he chose to wait it out, the way a man waits out a bad winter. On the 31st of March 1922, the new maid arrived for her first full day of work. She had come recommended by a nearby household. She unpacked her belongings and began to settle into the routine of the farm. By evening, all 6 people at Hinterkaifeck had gone silent. For 4 days, no one came to check on them. The postman noticed letters piling up, unopened, at the door. A teacher in the village asked why the little girl had not come to school. A neighbor realized the family had not been seen buying supplies, which was unlike them. And yet, neighbors later said that smoke had risen from the farmhouse chimney more than once during those 4 days, that someone had been seen moving near the barn. On the 4th of April, a small group of villagers, growing uneasy, finally walked out to the farm together. What they found would haunt the region for a century. In the barn, beneath loose hay, they found 4 bodies: Andreas Gruber, his wife, their daughter, Victoria, and her 7-year-old daughter. Each of them had been struck down with a tool taken from the farm's own tool shed. A mattock, the kind used for breaking hard earth. Investigators later believed the victims had not been killed all at once, in one place. It appeared that each of them had been drawn into the barn separately, one after another, without the others knowing what had happened. Inside the farmhouse, in the kitchen, they found the maid, and in a cradle nearby, the youngest child, the 2-year-old boy. All 6 were dead, all killed with the same weapon. Doctors examining the scene believed the family had already been dead for several days by the time they were found, which meant that whoever had done this had walked among the bodies and stayed. The investigators who arrived that day noticed something that made the case even harder to explain. The animals in the barn had been fed and watered after the family was already dead, which meant that whoever committed this crime did not run. They stayed. Some investigators believe the killer remained at Hinterkaifeck for days, living alongside the bodies, cooking in the kitchen, sleeping in the house, tending the cattle every morning, as if nothing at all had happened. The scale of the crime brought detectives from across Bavaria and drew national attention across Germany. They searched the farmhouse for a motive, and what they found raised more questions than it answered. Victoria's husband, the father of her children, had been reported killed years earlier, fighting in the First World War. But there were rumors in the village, rumors that he was not truly gone, that letters had once arrived hinting he might return. There were darker rumors too. Whispers, long before the murders, about the true father of Victoria's youngest child, and about a bond within the household that went further than it should have. Investigators questioned everyone who had ever set foot on the farm. Over the following years, more than 100 people would be brought in and asked what they knew. One name kept returning, a local man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer. He had once been engaged to Victoria. He was believed by some in the village to be the true father of her young son. And it was Schlittenbauer who led the search party to the barn, the day the bodies were found. Villagers later said he moved through the crime scene strangely calm, that he seemed to know exactly where to look, before anyone had told him what they were looking for. He was brought in for questioning, not once, but several times, over the following decade, in 1922, again in 1924, again in 1933. Each time, he denied any involvement. Each time the police released him for lack of proof strong enough to convict. He went on to remarry and remained in the area for the rest of his life, always under the weight of suspicion that never quite left him or his family's name. The murder weapon itself sat in the local station for years, unclaimed, its origins never fully confirmed. Over the decades, several other men would falsely confess to the killings, drawn in by the notoriety of the case. Each confession, when examined closely, fell apart. The details never matched what investigators had found at the scene. The case remained open, but grew colder with each passing season. Investigators returned to the farm again and again, walking the same fields, questioning the same neighbors. The footprints, the stolen newspaper, the missing keys, the sounds in the attic. Taken together, they painted the picture of someone who had been watching the family for days, perhaps longer, before he ever raised the mattock. Someone who knew the layout of the house, someone who knew where the tools were kept, someone the animals did not fear when he returned each morning to feed them. For a case with 6 victims, remarkably little evidence survived. The skulls of some of the victims were removed for scientific study, in the hope that future technology might one day identify a suspect. Decades later, during the bombing of the Second World War, those remains were lost. Whatever secrets they might have held were destroyed, along with so much else in that era. The farmhouse at Hinterkaifeck stood abandoned for years after the murders. Eventually, it was torn down completely. Villagers wanted no trace of it left standing. Today, nothing remains at the site but open farmland and a small memorial marker. In 2007, nearly a century after the killings, Bavarian police reopened the case. Investigators and criminology students returned to the surviving evidence, applying forensic methods that had not existed in 1922, hoping that new science might succeed where the old had failed. Lorenz Schlittenbauer remained, in the eyes of many investigators, the most likely name. But he had died decades earlier, and with him, quite possibly, the truth. No new evidence was strong enough to reopen a prosecution. No one was ever charged. No confession was ever proven true. The case was quietly closed once more, its central question exactly where it had always been. Who stayed behind in that farmhouse after the killing was done? Who fed the animals, lit the fire, and walked those quiet fields, while 6 bodies lay in the barn? To this day, people in Bavaria still call it the most mysterious murder case in German history. Books have been written about it. Documentaries have retraced every field and footpath, and still, no name has ever been proven. The people of that village still speak of the farm that no longer exists, of the footprints that only ever went one way, and of the smoke that rose from a chimney days after everyone inside was already gone.